Well, hello Hero Factory and welcome to another edition of Kids Church. It is so good to have you with us here today. So we are going to be carrying on with our series Royalty, but let's recap. So week 1 we learned all about Josiah and how he was 8 years old, but how he was a king that did the right thing. Then we learned about Queen Esther. Now the thing that's so special about Queen Esther is that she was so brave. She put herself in an impossible situation, but she had this incredible bravery and courage. And actually, as sons and daughters of the king, we need to make sure that we are also brave. So doing the right thing and being brave. And then we learn about Solomon, and we learn all about how he was asked by God, what do you want? And he chose wisdom, and how actually God can give us wisdom, and how wisdom is a really good thing to have so that we make right choices and do right things. And then last week we heard the story of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now he wasn't a good king at all, and because of all of the various stuff that we learn, he made a statue of himself and he tried to get people to worship him. Now we learn and we know that there is no other God but God. God is the one true God, and we need to put him first, to worship him, to love him, and we don't do that with anybody else. Now today we are going to be learning about another queen in the Bible, and the thing that we need to know about this queen is that we actually don't know her name. We don't know what she's called. All we know is that she is referred to as the Queen of Sheba. So let's watch this video and find out all about her.
King Solomon's relationship with the Lord, for which he was blessed with wealth and wisdom, had caused his fame to grow. When the Queen of Sheba heard about him, she came to ask Solomon some difficult and serious questions to test his wisdom. She arrived in Jerusalem with a huge caravan, including camels that were carrying large quantities of spices, gold, and precious stones. She came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing she asked him about was outside of his understanding, and he was easily able to explain everything to her. Sitting in the presence of such a wise man of God, who commanded such wealth and respect, made her feel in awe of him. The Queen of Sheba said, "When I heard about your achievements and wisdom, I had to see it with my own eyes to believe such a person could exist. Now that I am here, and I have met you and seen your kingdom, it is clear that your wisdom and wealth far exceed all reports." The queen continued, "How happy your people must be to have such a king. How happy your officials must be to serve someone who is so wise. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness." To seal their new friendship, the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon large quantities of gold, spices, and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. In addition to the Queen of Sheba's gifts, ships from Ophir brought gold, precious stones, and special wood that the king used to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. So much almug wood has never been imported or seen since that day. King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, in addition to the gifts he had given to her as his new friend. She then left to return to her own country with all the people who had accompanied her on her journey to Jerusalem.
Whoa, what a story. So this involves King Solomon as well, who we learned about a couple of weeks ago. So King Solomon obviously had all this wisdom and was ruling his kingdom and doing amazing things. And she had heard all about him. You know, we're not sure how she heard. Maybe somebody had seen King Solomon and then returned to where she lived and told her about it. But she had heard all about King Solomon. So she packs up all of these stones and spices and all of these amazing things, and she sets off on the long journey to go and find King Solomon. We read all about the story of the Queen Sheba in 1 Kings chapter 10, and this is what it says. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the famous Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked to him about all the things that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all of her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. So she had heard that King Solomon had all of this wisdom, and she had all of these questions. Now, I don't know about you, but have you ever had some questions? Maybe it's questions that you just don't know the answer to. Like, why do bad things happen? Why does sometimes people be sad? Why do sometimes people get ill? Why do sometimes people be horrible to me? And she had all of these questions, and she'd heard that King Solomon was full of so much wisdom. So she wanted to go to him and ask him these questions. And of course, King Solomon answered all of her questions. You know, Hero Factory, in the Bible, in a book called Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7, it says this: cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. You know, sometimes when we have these big questions inside of us, we can begin to worry about them, or we can begin to overthink them, and we can begin to get overwhelmed by them, and we can ask ourselves all the time, but what does this mean, and what happens if it happens to me, and it's really making me worry and be scared. But what that Bible verse says is that anything that we're worried about, any questions that we might have, anything that might scare us, we need to give them to God. You see, the Queen of Sheba had so many questions, and she took them to King Solomon, and she kind of asked him to help her with all of her questions that she had. You know, Hero Factory, there are tons of people in your life who want to help you with those questions. Maybe it's your Hero Factory leaders. Maybe wherever you are right now, maybe your leaders can help you. Maybe your leaders might not know the answer to these big questions, but maybe they might know somebody who does. And if they do, they might go and ask them. But if we have really big questions, we can also come to God. God wants to know what it is that we're worried about, that we're thinking about, that we're scared about. And we can give those big questions to him. The Queen of Sheba came to King Solomon to get some answers for all the questions that she had. And you know what, Hero Factory? As royalty ourselves, sometimes when we carry these questions that we don't have answers to, they can sometimes overwhelm us or make us anxious or worried. So what we need to do is ask those questions and try and find out the answer so that we don't need to be worried by them. So if you've got some big questions, how about today you either ask somebody about them or pray to God and ask him to help you?